But here goes.
Cancel Israel's observer status.
Engage impulse engines. Engage. Engage.
These are the journalisms by way
Engage.
of critical aggregation,
Engage.
illuminated from the analytical research of the historiographer,
Engage.
neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental.
Engage.
Your engagement
Engage.
through a like,
Engage.
a share, and a subscribe
Engage.
will accelerate us at warp
Engage.
speed towards the continuation of our mission.
Captain.
Engage emergency override.
Where no news
Engage.
will have been going before.
Engage. Engage. Engage forward shields 35%. Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Huwwara and Jenin attacked by occupiers. From the Palestine Chronicle, Palestinians tell of new massacre as Zionist occupation forces storm Jenin. Zionist occupation forces stormed the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank on Tuesday, killing several Palestinians and injuring others, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported. The Israeli army said security forces are currently operating in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern West Bank, but gave no further details. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said in a statement that the Israeli military assault in the Jenin refugee camp left 26 Palestinians wounded, 3 of them critically. The Palestinian Authority presidential spokesperson Nabil Abu Rudaneh said in a statement that the Israeli killing of Palestinians is an all-out war, and the crime committed by the occupation forces reaffirms the Israeli government's intention to thwart all regional and intentional efforts aimed at stopping all unilateral actions, which the Israeli side insists on continuing, said Abu Rudaneh. Abu Rudaneh called on the United States administration to take immediate action and put effective pressure on the Israeli government to stop its crimes and continuous aggression against the Palestinian people. And from Mondoweiss, 6 Palestinians killed in Jenin during second Israeli invasion of the city this year. The Israeli army launched yet another massive military invasion on bastions of Palestinian resistance, this time in 2 simultaneous raids on Nablus and Jenin. 6 Palestinians have been killed and more than a dozen injured after an Israeli military invasion of Jenin, the second large-scale offensive on the city and its refugee camp in the last 2 months. At the same time, the Israeli army also invaded Askar refugee camp in Nablus, injuring 12 Palestinians and arresting 3 others. Initial reports from the Israeli military claim that the twin invasions were a coordinated attack aimed at rooting out the resistance cell that allegedly orchestrated the Huwwara operation on February 26, which left 2 Israeli settlers dead. The 6 men killed in Jenin were identified by the Palestinian Ministry of Health as Mohammed Wael Ghazawi, 26, Mohammed Ahmad Salim Kloof, 22, Tariq Ziad Mustafa Natur, 27, Ziad Amin Al-Zarini, 29, Abdel Fattah Hussein Karusha, 49, and Mutasim Nasser Sabag, 22. Since the start of the year, Israeli forces have killed 72 Palestinians, 25 of whom were from the Jenin district alone. The Jenin invasion on Tuesday afternoon at approximately 2:45 p.m. Undercover Israeli special forces invaded Jenin just outside of Jenin refugee camp located east of the city. Footage from local residents allegedly shows the entry of undercover special forces in a white van carrying a West Bank license plate bearing Arabic graffiti that reads, "The Transportation of the Future." Although Mondo Ice did not independently verify these claims, previous extrajudicial assassination efforts have often included undercover forces entering locations in white vans. The military operation was carried out at midday, coinciding with after-school rush hour when roads were full of civilians. Within moments, military reinforcements of more than 24 armored vehicles, including military jeeps and bulldozers, raided the city from the illegal settlement of Dotan southwest of the camp and the Jalame military checkpoint northwest of the camp. A building was surrounded and besieged by the army under the pretext that armed Palestinian fighters were inside. Armed confrontations ensued between the army and Palestinians amid the incursion. Israeli forces fired live ammunition, tear gas, and other weapons during the offensive, which persisted until the evening. We're surrounded in the house. Special forces are in the area and are bombing our house and our neighbors' houses, all the houses around, a young man, Abu Azmi, is heard saying through an audio recording. "We are, Allah willing, holding on to our final breath. Pray for us," the man pleaded as the 15-second recording ended. "We beg you to pray for us." Iyad Abu al-Azmi was at home when he received a phone call from the army informing him to leave the premises. According to a post on his personal Facebook account, Abu al-Azmi reported that the army began to fire explosive devices at the house. Within 45 minutes of the offensive, an Israeli Apache military helicopter landed near the area where confrontations continued. After invading the camp, phone texts were sent to Palestinians in the area signed by Captain Ward, the current military major responsible for the Jenin area. The Israeli army and security forces will work to enforce justice and security, the message said. It will work with extreme firmness with whoever goes against the law and extends a hand to terror. Within the hour following the text, Israeli forces had already killed Mohammed Wael Ghazawi, 26, with a bullet to the chest, while injuring 5 others, including one in critical condition, according to the MOH. 2 Israeli officers from the Special Operations Yamam unit were injured during the offensive and were transferred to Rambam Hospital in Haifa, north of Jenin. By 5 p.m., another 2 Palestinians were killed. The Palestinian MOH identified the men as Mohammed Ahmad Salim Kloof, 22, and Tariq Ziad Mustafa Natur, 27. Within half an hour, another 3 were killed: Ziad Amin Al-Zaraini, 29, Mutasim Nasser Sabak, 22, and Abdel Fattah Hussein Karusha, 49. According to the Israeli military's media dispatch, 0404, the offensive in Jenin targeted the terrorists that killed Hillel Wegel Yaniv in Huwwara near Nablus last month on February 26. The media have widely reported that Karasa is responsible for the Huwwara shooting, which happened 4 days after the Israel army had invaded Nablus and killed 11 Palestinians. Immediately after the Huwwara shooting on February 26, Israeli settlers from nearby settlements rampaged throughout the town, an arson campaign that's been described as pogrom, even by the head of the Israeli army's general command. Sons of Askar resistance fighter arrested. Karusha, although killed in Jenin, is from Askar refugee camp near Nablus. Karusha had reportedly sought refuge in Jenin refugee camp to escape potential extrajudicial execution. During the invasion of Jenin, another twin military offensive was taking place in Askar refugee camp in Nablus, 40 kilometers southeast of Jenin, at approximately 3:30 p.m. Israeli military forces raided Nablus and surrounded a building on Sahel Askar, located on the periphery of Askar refugee camp. According to the MOH, 12 Palestinians were injured during the invasion, with one in critical condition with a bullet to the abdomen. By the end of the raid on Askar, the Israeli army reported that it had arrested 3 brothers, Khalid, Qasim, and Abdel Karusha, the sons of the slain Abdel Fattah Karusha. They were transferred for interrogation by the Israeli Shin Bet under suspicion of having allegedly aided their father. And from the cradle, Israeli army raids Jenin, kills 6 Palestinians. Israel has killed at least 65 Palestinians since the beginning of 2023. The Israeli army killed 6 Palestinians and injured 11 more during a raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank on 7 March, Wafa reported. According to eyewitness, Israeli soldiers besieged a house with Palestinian resistance fighters holed up inside, while an Israeli Apache helicopter fired missiles at the home. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, the fatalities included Ghazawi 26, Husseiniya 26, Natur 27, Zaraini 29, Sabag 22, and Karusha 49. Palestinian activist Jamal Huwwara told Al-Mayadeen that 2 Israeli drones were shot down above Jenin and that the Israeli military fired several missiles at the besieged house. The Israeli army claimed that the perpetrator of the attack in Huwwara that killed 2 Israeli settlers on 26 February was among the dead. Following the resistance in Huwwara, Israeli settlers launched a several-hour pogrom against Huwwara, killing 1 Palestinian, injuring at least 390, and torturing dozens of Palestinian homes and vehicles under the supervision of Israeli troops. The Hebrew daily Yedioth Ahronoth said about 400 settlers took part in the attack and that 6 of the houses burned by settlers were set on fire while residents were inside. In a similar attack in July 2015, an 18-month-old Palestinian boy burned to death after settlers set fire to his family's house in Duma village south of Nablus City in the occupied West Bank. Israeli politicians encourage further settler violence against the Palestinian residents of Huwwara, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who said on 1 March that Huwwara should be wiped out. Former Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard, who was in prison for 20 years for spying on the United States, expressed a similar sentiment, claiming on 6 March that our enemies only understand decisive retaliation. The destruction of Huwwara will mark the beginning of the reconquest of our land. Israel has killed at least 65 Palestinians since the beginning of 2023. The violence of this year has been described as some of the bloodiest in recent Palestinian memory. Comments from Smotrich, Pollard, and others about destroying Palestinian villages and conquering Palestine have raised fears that many in Israel's new government are hoping for a mass expulsion of Palestinians. In response to Finance Minister Smotrich's threats against Palestine and Huwwara, former Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz claimed that Smotrich wants to cause another Palestinian Nakba. For him, escalation is a desirable thing. In 1947, pre-state Zionist militias forcibly expelled and carried out the ethnic cleansing of some 750,000 Palestinians, known as the Nakba, that paved way for the creation of the State of Israel with a Jewish demographic majority. And from Al-Mayadeen, the Palestinian resistance shoots down 2 Israeli marches. Should be drones. It's a bad translation. 2 Israeli drones in the Jenin refugee camp. The Palestinian resistance shot down 2 Israeli drones during the clashes with the Israeli occupation forces on the outskirts of a Jenin camp. Today, Tuesday, Israeli media reported that an Israeli occupation drone crashed during an operation in the city of Jenin, occupied Palestine. And the Palestinian activist Jamal Huwwara stated in an interview with Al-Mayadeen that a second Israeli drone was shot down over the Jenin camp, indicating that the clashes between the resistance fighters and the occupation forces are still continuing in Jenin. Huwwara indicated that the occupation forces fired more missiles at the besieged house in Jenin, explaining that the occupation's Apache helicopters are roaming the airspace of Jenin in the meantime. Palestinians were killed and a number of people were injured today when the Israeli occupation forces stormed the city of Jenin and its camp amid clashes with Palestinian resistance fighters, and this coincided with occupation forces storming the city of Nablus and arresting a number of Palestinians. And from TRT World, Israeli army storms West Bank Jenin city, kills 6 Palestinians. The latest killing follows an overnight violence in the village of Huwwara, where Israeli soldiers were seen on video dancing with illegal Jewish settlers and celebrating attack on Palestinians. The Israeli army has stormed the occupied West Bank city of Jenin, killing at least 6 Palestinians and wounding 10 others, according to Palestine health officials. The Palestine Health Ministry on Tuesday identified one of the fatalities as 26-year-old Mohammed Ghazawi. The ministry later announced 5 other Palestinians were shot and killed without giving further details. At least 26 Palestinians were also wounded during the raid. The ministry said 3 of them seriously. The Israeli army said 2 of its soldiers were lightly wounded. Israel said that among those who were killed was an alleged suspect accused of killing 2 Israelis in the northern West Bank town of Huwwara last week. The raid was the latest in a string of deadly violence by the Israeli military in the northern West Bank. Last month, a rare daytime military raid in the old city of Nablus left 11 Palestinians dead. Nabil Abu Rudaine, spokesperson for Palestine's president Mahmoud Abbas, called the use of rockets in the Jenin an act of all-out war, Palestinian news agency Wafa reported. Turkish Foreign Ministry published a statement saying it strongly condemns Israeli forces and illegal settlers over the increasing violence and attacks in the occupied West Bank Huwwara attack. Witnesses said Israeli troops entered the camp and surrounded a house as a group of Palestinians fought back, with the army reporting explosive devices and blocks were hurled at the soldiers. Earlier, illegal Israeli settlers also attacked Palestinians in Huwwara. The Zionist army and border police forces dispersed crowds of Zionist occupiers of what the military described as a number of violent riots in Huwwara during the overnight attack on Monday. Videos shared on social media showed a group of black-clad youths attacking a Palestinian car before its driver manages to pull away. They were shooting at us with live ammunition, Allah help us, said Omar Khalifa, who just finished shopping at a supermarket and got into the car with his family when the attack took place. My wife was sitting in the back and she hugged our daughter to cover her. We could have lost her. There was real danger to our lives. Other footage appeared to show Israeli soldiers dancing together with illegal Jewish settlers in the town on what was the Jewish festival of Purim. Huwwara has been conquered, gentlemen, a voice is heard saying in Hebrew. Egypt decries Zionist forces raid on Jenin refugee camp. Egypt strongly condemned on Tuesday Zionist occupation forces storming of Jenin refugee camp, leaving a number of Palestinians killed and wounded. The Foreign Ministry said in a statement that Egypt rejects such Zionist policies and the killings of innocent Palestinians in a blatant violation of international law. Egypt urged all international parties, particularly in the U.S., the European Union, and the United Nations Security Council, to act urgently for putting an end to such escalating acts and diffuse tensions between the two sides, according to the statement. It stressed that peace can be achieved through engaging in serious negotiations in accordance with the two-state solution and international legitimacy resolutions in order to reach a just and comprehensive peace in the region and set up an independent Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with Al-Quds as its capital. And from Wafa, Prime Minister Shtaya condemns Israel's killings in Jenin and says Palestinians will continue the struggle until freedom. Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya tonight condemned what he described as the horrific massacre committed by the Israeli occupation forces in Jenin camp this evening, which claimed the lives of 6 Palestinians and a number of injuries, in addition to the targeting of homes and the destruction of property, and said that the Palestinians will continue in their struggle until they gain their freedom and independence. Shtaya called on the U.S. administration to intervene to stop the massacres in the Palestinian cities, towns, villages, and refugee camps in which dozens of people were killed. He also called on an international human rights organization to condemn this crime, to hold the occupation authorities fully responsible for it, and for all crimes committed, and to not allow the perpetrators to escape punishment. Shtaya affirmed the right of the Palestinian people to continue their struggle to the end of the occupation. obtained their freedom and established their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. And from Mina, Israel occupation forces kill 6 Palestinians in Jenin. 6 civilians and several members of the Palestinian security forces and Fatah movement were killed while resisting the Israeli occupation forces that raided the Jenin refugee camp in the early hours of Tuesday. The Ministry of Health reported that the number of martyrs reached 6, with several injured due to the Zionist aggression on Jenin. It added that at least 16 more Palestinians had been wounded in the brutal raid, which involved, according to reports, dozens of armored vehicles, military helicopters, snipers, drones, and bulldozers. The ministry added that 6 martyrs and 10 injuries, including a serious injury to the abdomen, were transferred to Jenin Government Hospital. The ministry identified the martyrs as Ghazawi 26, Husseiniya 26, Natur 27, Zaraina 29, and Karusha 49, also Sabag 22. The ministry further stated that 10 injuries were transferred to Jenin Government Hospital, while 2 medium injuries in the thigh and shoulder were taken to Ibn Sina Hospital. Local sources reported that the Israeli forces targeted a house in the Jenin refugee camp with a missile, while smoke columns were seen rising from it. The Jenin refugee camp has turned into a war zone following the incursion of special forces backed by Zionist army troops and the siege of several homes that were bombed with several missiles, which led to the martyrdom of the 3 young men from Fatah movement and Palestinian security forces, according to security sources. The Zionist forces targeted journalists and ambulances and prevented them from carrying out their humanitarian duties. The Israeli army used unmanned aerial vehicles in its aggression on Jenin, where the resistance fighters were able to shoot down one of them. 61 Palestinians, including civilians, have been killed in 2023, the Palestinian Health Ministry said last month. For his part, presidential spokesman Dr. Nabil Abu Rudaina said that the daily killings carried out by the Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinian people, the latest of which was today in Jenin refugee camp, the bombing of homes with rockets and explosive shells, is an all-out war and destroys everything. He stressed in a statement that the Israeli government bears full responsibility for this dangerous escalation, which threatens an explosion in the situation and destroys all efforts aimed at restoring stability. The crime committed by the occupation forces reaffirms the Israeli government's intention to thwart all regional and intentional efforts aimed at stopping all unilateral actions which the Zionist side insists on continuing, said Abu Rudain. He called on the U.S. administration to take immediate action and put effective pressure on the Israeli government to stop its crimes and continuous aggression against the Palestinian people, stressing that the current events have proven that resolving the Palestinian issue in accordance with international legitimacy and international law and giving the Palestinian people their right to freedom and independence is the key to resolving the region's crisis. And from the cradle, Israeli army raids Jenin, kills 6 Palestinians. Actually from C.News. 6 Palestinians killed in Israeli army raid in Jenin. Six Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli army raid in the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank, the Palestinian Health Ministry has said. The raid on Tuesday afternoon took place in a refugee camp, which is a frequent target for Israeli operations against Palestinian militants. Or citizens. There were reports of heavy exchanges of gunfire, while videos on social media showed smoke billowing from a building and helicopters flying over a long line of military vehicles. The Palestinian Health Ministry listed the dead as 5 men in their 20s and 1 man of 49, identified as Abdel Fattah Karusha. A spokesman for the Palestinian presidency Nabul Abu Rudaina said the Israel government was responsible for this dangerous escalation, accusing it of waging all-out war. And let's be clear, what he said, what Rudaina said was that shooting a rocket into a building, in fact, I read that it was 18 rockets, but shooting these rockets into buildings is an act of war. He didn't say that they waged all-out war. I mean, I guess shooting a rocket could be called waging, but that's not what they said. Jordan, Qatar, and Egypt condemn Israel army assault on Jenin, killing of Palestinians. Jordan, Qatar, and Egypt strongly condemn in separate statements Israel's assault on the northern West Bank city of Jenin and the killing of 6 Palestinians, says Wafa. Jordan's foreign ministry said in a statement that Israel should immediately stop the military escalation against the Palestinian people, warning that the escalation will lead to further deterioration in the situation and more violence, as well as undermine efforts to achieve calm, calling for an end to the illegitimate and illegal Israeli measures and to seriously engage in effective negotiations to achieve a just and comprehensive peace that ends the occupation and achieve an independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds as its capital. Qatari Foreign Ministry considered the assault as a blatant violation of international legitimacy resolutions, warning of an explosion in the Palestinian territories while urging the international community to take urgent action to stop the Zionist aggression, provide protection for the brotherly Palestinian people, and hold Israel accountable for its horrific crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories. In a statement, the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirmed its total rejection of the policy of the repeated Zionist incursions and the resulting civilian casualties among the Palestinian people, which is accompanied by the destruction of property, the demolition of homes, and the loss of lives in clear violation of the rules of international law. This heralds a serious deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories and threatens to destabilize the region, it said. Egypt appealed to all international actors, led by the United States, the European Union, and members of the Security Council, to assume their responsibilities to put an end to the ongoing unilateral and escalatory measures and to create conditions to enable the efforts to bring calm and a peaceful settlement to bear fruit away from the existing destructive cycle of violence. Also from Wafa, UN Special Coordinator says Israel should protect Palestinian people and the population against its occupier attacks. The United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Wennesland, today said that he was appalled by the violence and that Zionist occupier attacks against the Palestinian civilian population in the occupied territory, stressing that the Zionists must ensure the civilian population safely. I am deeply disturbed by the continuing violence and appalled by the attacks of Zionist occupiers against Palestinians 2 days ago in Huwwara near Nablus, as the occupying power must ensure that the civilian population is protected and perpetrators are held to account, said the UN coordinator in a statement. I condemn occupier violence against Palestinians, he said, stressing all civilians must be protected from violence. Wennesland said he was also alarmed by the events in Jenin yesterday, during which 6 Palestinians were killed and more than 20 injured in a Zionist army assault on the northern West Bank city and its refugee camp. We're in the midst of a cycle of violence that must be stopped immediately, he said. The Security Council has spoken with one voice, calling on the parties to observe calm and restraint and to refrain from provocative actions, incitement, and inflammatory rhetoric. Commitments were made in Aqaba in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan that should be implemented if we're to find a way forward, said the special coordinator. The parties must refrain from further steps that would lead us to more violence. Also from Wafa, Turkey condemns Israel's assault on Jenin and the killings of 6 Palestinians. We condemn in the strongest terms this increased aggression and act of violence by the Zionist forces and Zionist occupiers in the West Bank, said a Turkish foreign ministry statement, stressing that the killing of 6 Palestinians in Jenin and the acts of violence and intimidation by Israeli settlers against the Palestinian residents of the town of Huwwara in the West Bank are unacceptable. The foreign ministry said these increased attacks and actions feed the spiral of violence, further escalating the tension in the region and, most importantly, damaging the international efforts aiming at de-escalating tension at a period when the holy month of Ramadan is approaching. It called for putting an end to these attacks and preventing violence, inviting at the same time the Zionist government to act with common sense and responsibility. From Middle East Monitor, Palestinians killed as Israel storms Jenin camp. At least 4 Palestinians have been killed and dozens wounded by the Israeli army's bullets after occupation forces stormed the Jenin refugee camp in the northern West Bank today. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said in a brief statement that there were 3 injured people, including one with a serious injury to the chest, arrived at the Jenin government hospital. 2 of those injuries were in the thigh. 2 of those injuries were in the thigh and the shoulder. Palestine TV reported that occupation forces had besieged a house inside the Jenin camp. The owner of the house did not know about the action until he witnessed the sight on the news, it added. Special units hid in civilian cars to storm the camp and besiege the house, the report said. Military vehicles accompanied by a bulldozer followed the civilian car to besiege the camp. The house was shelled and smoke could be seen rising from it, witnesses told the Anadolu agency. Drones could also be seen operating overhead. The Israeli army said in a brief statement, Our forces are operating in Jenin without giving further details. Israel's Ben-Gvir instructs police to use force after Jenin camp raid. Zionist far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir yesterday threatened to shed the blood of those who arm Zionist occupiers. The minister was quoted in Zionist media as saying that everyone who raises a hand to harm settlers should know that he instructed the police to spill blood. Ben-Gvir's remarks came after occupation forces assassinated 6 Palestinian citizens in the West Bank city of Jenin yesterday. The Palestinian Ministry of Health stated that 6 Palestinians were killed and 9 others were injured, including one who was seriously injured after Zionist forces raided the Jenin refugee camp. The Palestinians who were killed were aged between 22 and 49. Palestinian factions praise resistance in West Bank. Palestinian factions said that the Palestinian resistance in the occupied West Bank will continue and that the occupation's territories. Palestinian factions said the Palestinian resistance in the occupied West Bank will continue and that the occupation's terrorist policies of killing and destroying the Palestinian people are doomed to failure. In a separate statement, Palestinian factions warned Zionists of the consequences of the massacres it's committing in the cities and camps of the occupied West Bank. The factions' warnings came following the Israeli raid on the outskirts of the Jenin refugee camp in the northern occupied West Bank yesterday, which killed 6 Palestinians and injured several others. During the raid, Zionist forces besieged a house in the refugee camp and bombed it with anti-tank missiles. Hamas, Fatah, Islamic Jihad, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine condemned the Zionists' occupation aggression and praised the Palestinian people's resolve and determination to defeat the occupation. The Palestinian factions also paid tribute to the martyrs of the Jenin camp and the steadfastness of resistance fighters who shot down a number of Zionist drones that were flying over the camp. And we'll be back with more news. Israeli settlers attack Huwwara for second time in 10 days, says the Cradle. Government officials have emboldened settlers to wipe out Huwwara. Settlers under the protection of the Israeli army stormed Huwwara south of the occupied West Bank city of Nablus on the evening of 6 March, firing live ammunition at Palestinians, throwing stones, and vandalizing vehicles in the second rampage of the town in the span of 10 days. According to eyewitness, several Palestinians attempted to confront the occupiers and were fired at with tear gas canisters by the Zionist military, resulting in a number of suffocation cases. Video footage circulating social media shows settlers and Zionist soldiers celebrating and dancing during the rampage, which coincided with the start of the holiday Purim. Unconfirmed reports state that Palestinian resistance fighters responded to the storming of the town by targeting a number of Israeli checkpoints and settlements in Nablus with gunfire. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society reported that 31 Palestinians were injured as a result of the simultaneous attack by settlers and Zionist troops. By midnight, the rampage had ended. However, the following day, occupiers continued smaller-scale attacks in Huwwara. Video footage showed the shattered glass of a clothing store reportedly targeted by settler gunfire on 7 March. Additionally, clashes broke out between Palestinian youth and settlers in the town of Uruf and Nablus. Last night's attack on Huwwara was the second occupier rampage to take place in the town in a span of less than 2 weeks. At the end of the last month, on 26 February, occupiers launched a several-hour pogrom against Huwwara, killing 1 Palestinian, injuring at least 390, and torturing dozens of Palestinian homes and vehicles under the supervision of Zionist troops. A few days later, on 1 March, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that Huwwara should be wiped out. This latest settler attack against Huwwara comes as tensions continue to accumulate as a result of Israeli violence and oppression. As the holy month of Ramadan approaches, tensions are expected to build even further. On 6 March, hours before the storming of Huwwara, Hebrew media reported that the Zionist National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir ordered security forces to carry out demolitions of Palestinian homes in occupied Al-Quds throughout Ramadan, which begins on 22 March. In an audio recording obtained by Hebrew media, Ben-Gvir reportedly revealed his intention to shut down the Al-Aqsa Mosque for 10 days during Ramadan, which, if true, is likely to result in significant escalation. From Al-Ram Online, Israeli settlers continue attacking Palestinian villages. Israeli settlers stormed a Palestinian village Tuesday near the city of Salfit in the northern West Bank, attacking Palestinian civilians as they took the escalating West Bank violence to new heights. The village of Kuful Haris witnessed early morning around 100 settlers who broke into the village and performed religious rituals while chanting into anti-Palestinian slogans, local sources told the Palestinian news agency Wafa. According to Wafa, the occupiers were protected by Zionist forces. In a separate incident in the northern West Bank village of Uruf, Zionist occupiers from the illegal Yitzhar occupation settlement assaulted an elderly Palestinian farmer while working on his land and was quickly arrested by Zionist soldiers. Similarly, the northern West Bank village of Huwwara, located near Nablus, witnessed renewed aggression last night by Zionist occupiers who violently attacked residents, shopkeepers, and commuters on the main road. A Palestinian family traveling on the road was hurt when occupiers began hurling stones at the vehicle, injuring the passengers. An occupier fired live fire at another resident passing on the road, causing damage to the car without anyone being hurt. Residents came out to confront the occupier but were attacked by soldiers who joined the occupier in dancing in the town streets. Several people suffocated from inhaling gas fired by the soldiers. Huwwara was the scene last week of pogrom by occupiers who set dozens of Palestinian homes and vehicles ablaze, killed 1 person and injured over 350 others. Last week, a violent attack on Huwwara garnered international condemnation after hundreds of Israeli settlers set homes, cars ablaze, and hurled stones at Palestinian residents, while a Palestinian man was killed in the nearby village of Zatra. More than 350 Palestinians were injured during the Huwwara attack, most suffering from tear gas inhalation, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society said. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk warned the Human Rights Council Friday that the increasing violence is condemning innocent people on all sides to further tragedy, calling on both sides to adhere to a commitment to de-escalation reached following talks last week in Jordan. In the near future, there must be an end to settlements in occupied land. And within a foreseeable horizon, there must be a two-state solution, Turk insisted. For this violence to end, the occupation must end on all sides. There are people who know this. Volker Turk is not very adamant about what he's saying. Very middle ground milquetoast. And that is from Egyptian news source, and he's a UN human rights chief, so that goes to show you his political leanings. And from Wafa, Israeli settlers continue their rampage and provocations in the occupied West Bank. Israeli settlers continued their rampage and provocations in the occupied West Bank, storming villages and attacking Palestinian civilians. In the town of Huwwara, north of the northern western bank city of Salfit, around 100 occupiers broke this morning into the town under army protections and performed religious rituals while chanting anti-Palestinian slogans. Huwwara was the scene last week of a pogrom by settlers who set dozens of Palestinian homes and vehicles ablaze, killed one person, and injured 350 others. From the Electronic Intifada, 4 Palestinians, including a girl, were taken to a hospital Monday after Israeli settlers attacked them with stones in the occupied West Bank village of Huwwara. That's the same village where settlers, backed by Israeli soldiers, rampaged late last month, burning cars, homes, and businesses. One person, 37-year-old Sameh Aktash, who had just returned from Turkey where he was volunteering to help earthquake victims, was killed during that pogrom. Following that attack, Zionist Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich issued the genocidal call for Huwwara to be wiped out. On Thursday, Ronnie Akalik and Eugene Puryear on Breakthrough News talked about the attack on Huwwara in the broader context of Israel's escalating extremism and violence, especially in its increasingly frequent lethal raids into Palestinian cities and refugee camps. Despite international condemnation of their earlier attacks on Huwwara, Zionists are doing nothing to restrain the settlers, the occupiers. The pogroms in Huwwara continue as part of the occupiers' Purim celebrations, backed by the government and lack of enforcement by their authorities, Yesh Din, a Zionist human rights group, said. On Monday, settlers were seen dancing and singing in the streets of the village, part of the celebration of the Jewish festival of Purim, a display one journalist called a show of Jewish supremacy. Purim is often celebrated by dressing up in costumes, but for the Zionist settlers, for the Zionist occupiers, vanguard, it's long been an occasion to parade their racism and violence. One enthusiastic participant in that ugly tradition has been Itamar Ben-Gvir, now Israel's national security minister. As a young adult in 1995, Ben-Gvir dressed up as Baruch Goldstein, the American Jewish settler and medical doctor who a year earlier massacred 29 Palestinians performing Ramadan prayers at Hebron's Ibrahimi Mosque. Goldstein is my hero, Ben-Gvir can be heard telling Zionist television in the clip. Although this violent hatred of Palestinians is undimmed, nowadays Ben-Gvir plays the statesman, marking Purim with a solemn religious service alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But in Palestinian towns, the occupiers continue to run wild with the full support of the Zionist army. Using Purim as an excuse for violence is practically tradition in the occupied West Bank, breaking the silence an Israeli anti-occupation group observed. Last night in Huwwara, settlers and soldiers danced together to Purim music while others occupiers attacked Palestinians, breaking the silence at it. Unfortunately, the rest of the year, the Zionist army and settlers don't bother with excuses for their relentless violence against Palestinians. And watch this space. Remember that your engagement through a like, a share, and a subscribe will propel us at warp speed. It will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Israeli attack on Aleppo is crime against humanity, Iran says. So far this year, Israel has attacked Syrian territory on at least 4 occasions. On Tuesday, the Iranian Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani said, in a strong condemnation, that the Zionist attack on Syria's Aleppo International Airport is a crime against humanity. Israel targeted the civil airport, the main route for the delivery of international humanitarian aid to the Syrian city when the quake-stricken people in Aleppo are still under tough circumstances, he said, slamming the attack as a flagrant case of crimes against humanity. Kanani regretted that some countries, as well as Western and human rights organizations, have remained silent in the face of continued brutal and inhumane Zionist attacks on Syria. The attack damaged the Aleppo airport's runway and took it out of service, already heavily destructed as a result of the years-long war in Syria. Aleppo has also suffered considerable damage in the deadly earthquakes that hit southern Turkey and northwestern Syria on February 6th. As a result of the damage caused to the runway, the Syrian civil aviation authorities diverted planes providing assistance to those affected by the earthquakes to Damascus at Latakia. The Transport Ministry announced that technical terms are inspecting the airport facilities to determine the extent of the damage and repair the infrastructure affected by the attack. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights recalled that the Aleppo airport had already been the target of another missile attack in September 2022. On that occasion, the impact caused significant material damage and forced the suspension of air traffic temporarily. So far this year, the Zionists have attacked Syrian territory on at least 4 occasions. Its authorities have justified these actions by arguing that Syria harbors Lebanese and Iranian armed groups. From Press TV, Israeli airstrike on Aleppo airport constitutes gross violation of international law. The Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and expatriates said in a statement on Tuesday that strikes once again reflect the ugliest forms of barbarism and inhumanity of the Tel Aviv regime, the country's official news agency reported. The Syrian ministry also said the Israeli strike is considered a double crime as it targeted a civilian airport as well as the main channel for the delivery of humanitarian aid to the victims of the devastating earthquake that hit the area on February 6th. It further warned Israel about the repercussions of its acts of aggression against the Arab country, calling on the international community to take the necessary measures to end the Israeli regime's crimes. Early on Tuesday, Israeli aircraft carried out a new strike against the internal airport in Aleppo from the direction of the Mediterranean Sea west of the city of Latakia. Syrian media, quoting a military source, reported that the attack caused only material damage to the runway of Aleppo International Airport and took the airport out of service. Syrian media had earlier said that the country's air defenses intercepted Israeli missiles coming from the direction of the Mediterranean, shooting down a number of them. The new Israeli strike comes as the international airport in Aleppo is one of the main portals of entry for foreign airplanes carrying humanitarian aid to the victims of the country's recent devastating earthquake. Zionists frequently violate Syrian sovereignty by carrying out missile attacks on targets inside the country, mostly using the airspace of Lebanon or the occupied territories. The targets include residential buildings, military positions, especially those of the Hezbollah resistance movement, which has played a key role in helping the Syrian army in its fight against foreign-backed terrorists, are also frequently hit by Zionist strikes. The Tel Aviv regime has been a main supporter of terrorist groups that have battled the government of President Bashar al-Assad since the foreign-backed militancy erupted in Syria in early 2011. Syria has repeatedly complained to the UN over Zionist assaults, urging the Security Council to take action against Tel Aviv's crimes. The calls have, however, fallen on deaf ears. And from People's Dispatch, Israeli airstrikes target Aleppo airport, making aid delivery in Syria more difficult. The Airstrike is expected to affect aid delivery to areas affected by the devastating earthquake on February 6, in which 6,000 were killed in Syria and thousands more injured and displaced. Early in the morning of Tuesday, March 7th, an Israeli airstrike damaged part of Aleppo International Airport in Syria. This will affect aid delivery to one of Syria's provinces worst affected by last month's earthquake. The Syrian Arab news agency Sana quoted an unnamed Syrian military source according to whom at around 2 a.m. on Tuesday, the Israeli enemy carried out an aerial act of aggression from the direction of the Mediterranean west of Latakia, targeting Aleppo International Airport, which led to material damage at the airport as it went out of service. Though there have been no reports of casualties yet, Sana noted in a tweet that due to the damage, Syria's transport ministries decided to shift all humanitarian aid planes and schedules flighted from Aleppo Airport to Damascus Airport. Aleppo is one of the four provinces in Syria most affected by last month's earthquake. The other three were Latakia, Idlib, and Hama, which killed over 50,000 people in total in both Turkey and Syria. In Syria alone, close to 6,000 people were killed. Aleppo Airport was being used to transport international aid to the earthquake-affected areas in Syria's northwest. Damascus is more than 224 miles away from Aleppo, which may affect the speed of aid delivery. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied its role in the airstrike so far. Zionists frequently violate Syrian and Lebanese airspace and carry out attacks within Syria. It's carried out hundreds of such attacks inside Syria since the beginning of the war in the country in 2011. Hundreds of Syrians have been killed in these attacks, which have also caused large-scale destruction and damage to infrastructure in the war-ravaged country. At least 5 Syrians were killed in similar Zionist attacks in the civilian areas of capital Damascus on February 19th. A Zionist airstrike in early January had partially damaged the Damascus International Airport and killed 2 Syrian soldiers. The damage to the airport also affected aid and rescue operations in the country after the February 6 earthquake, as it was not fully operational at the time. Zionists usually do not acknowledge those attacks. On the rare occasion when they do, they try to justify them by terming them defensive operations, allegedly targeting supposed Iranian military presence in Syria. Both Iran and Syria have contested such claims. The Syrian government on previous occasions has accused Israel of trying to prolong the war in the country by aiding rebel forces through these airstrikes. Syria has also filed several complaints in the UNSC asking that action be taken against the Zionists. From Aram Online, Israel strikes knockout airport in Syria's Aleppo ministry. Israel warplanes struck Aleppo airport before dawn Tuesday, causing significant damage that halted flights to and from Syria's war and quake-battered city, the defense ministry said. At exactly 2:07 a.m., 23:07 GMT Monday, the Israeli enemy carried out an air attack from the Mediterranean west of Latakia, targeting Aleppo International Airport. Syria's defense ministry said in a statement that the damage forced authorities to close the airport to all flights. There was no immediate word on any casualties. The foreign ministry called the Zionist strike a double crime, saying that it targeted a civilian airport and a main channel for the flow of aid to areas hit by last month's earthquake. The airport's been a major conduit for aid flights since the February 6 earthquake devastated swaths of southeastern Turkey and neighboring Syria, and they too were brought to a stop, a transport ministry official said. More than 88 flights have landed in Aleppo over the past month with relief supplies for quake-hit areas, transport ministry official Suleiman Khalil told AFP. It's no longer possible to receive aid flights until the damage has been repaired, he added. He said all flights that were supposed to head to Aleppo will land in the capital Damascus or the international airport in the coastal province of Latakia. There was no comment from Zionist officials. Zionists carry out hundreds of strikes on targets inside government-controlled parts of Syria in recent years, including attacks on the Damascus and Aleppo airports, but it rarely acknowledges or discusses the operations. Zionists have attacked Aleppo airport several times in recent years, with the strike last September putting it out of service for a few days. On February 19, Zionist airstrikes targeted residential areas in Syria's capital, Damascus, killing at least 5 people and wounding 15, according to Syrian state news. On January, the Syrian army said Zionist military fired missiles toward the capital's international airport, putting it out of service and killing 2 soldiers. That attack came amid Zionist fears the Damascus airport was being used to funnel Iranian weaponry into the country. From Mehr News Agency, aggression on Aleppo airport shows Zionist regime's barbarism. Foreign and Expatriates Ministry has stressed that the criminal aggression perpetrated by the Israel regime on Tuesday at dawn, which targeted Aleppo International Airport and caused it to go out of service, is considered a double crime, as it targeted from one hand a civil airport, and on the other hand it targeted one of the main channels for the delivery of humanitarian aid from inside and outside Syria to the victims of the devastating earthquake that hit the area on February 6th, Sanaa reported. The ministry added in a statement posted on its page on Twitter that this aggression reflects again the ugliest forms of barbarism and inhumanity of the Israel regime and its practice of the most outrageous violations of the international law, including the international humanitarian law. Syria warns the Zionists against the repercussions of continuing commitment of those crimes. The ministry also said, calling upon the international community to condemn them and work on putting an end for them, particularly that they plan more threats and risks on the security and peace of the region and the world. The Zionists carried out an air attack from the direction of the Mediterranean Sea west of Latakia, targeting Aleppo International Airport early on Tuesday morning. The city of Aleppo was heavily damaged in the deadly 7.8 magnitude earthquake that hit southern Turkey and northwestern Syria last month. A number of countries have since sent aid shipments to the city's airport. And from TurkeyNewspaper.com, Zionists launched airstrike on Aleppo International Airport. Since last year, Zionist airstrikes on Syria have been increasing. This time, the Zionist army attacked Aleppo International Airport on Tuesday. It's unknown if there were any casualties in the attack. According to the Syrian state news agency Sana, citing a military source on Tuesday, Zionists launched an airstrike on Syria. The attack took place at Aleppo International Airport. The attack damaged the runway. The airport was out of service. Syrian air defenses intercepted missiles launched from the Mediterranean Sea west of the coastal city of Latakia at 2:07 a.m. local time, Sana added. There was no explanation for the loss of life. Attacks continue since last year. Last year, Israel intensified strikes on Syrian airports to disrupt Tehran's increasing use of aerial supply lines to deliver arms to allies in Syria and Lebanon, including Hezbollah. In the attack carried out by the Zionists on February 19th, settlements in Damascus were targeted. 5 people were killed and 15 were injured in the attack. On January 2nd, the Syrian army said Israel's military fired missiles toward the capital's international airport, putting it out of service and killing 2 soldiers. And we'll return with more news after this. Watch this space.
Today's unemployment figures show the economy is moving in the right direction. The drop in unemployment is one more sign that the economy is strengthening.
Syrians hold sit-in Damascus calling for removal of U.S. sanctions. Syrian political parties along with Syria-based Palestine factions have gathered in Arnous Square in Damascus calling on the U.S. and its Western allies to lift economic sanctions on Syria. Speakers said this Western siege on Syria is inhumane and requires urgent actions by the international community, considering that people in Syria are dealing with the deteriorating economic conditions following the recent earthquakes. Participants raised Syrian and Palestinian flags, as well as banners asking for an end to the decades-long bans that have deprived them of all their basic needs and resulted in a surge in food and medicine prices. The recent earthquakes have further worsen the already deteriorating economic and humanitarian situation in Syria. The UN says even before the earthquake tragedy, 70% of the population needed humanitarian assistance due to the war in the country. One challenge after another, Syrians endured so many hardships in the past decade that made living a normal life a daily challenge. U.S. and EU sanctions exacerbated their suffering, and they demand an end to such injustice. That's from Muhammad Ali with Press TV.
Syrian political parties, along with Syria-based Palestinian factions, have gathered in Arnous Square in Damascus, calling on the U.S. and its Western allies to lift economic sanctions on Syria. Speakers said this Western siege on Syria is inhumane and requires urgent actions by the international community, considering that people in Syria are dealing with deteriorating economic conditions following the recent earthquakes.
We express our anger over the unilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S. and its allies. Syrians suffered a lot as a result of such unjust and inhumane actions. Not lifting them is a crime against humanity. We call on the UN to shoulder its responsibilities and try to get such sanctions lifted.
We reiterate our support for Syria and reject the unjust Caesar Act, which led to shortages in basic needs. We call on the U.S. to stop looting Syria's resources and get out of the Arab country. We also call on Arab and Islamic nations to stand beside Syrians dealing with crises. We call on the Arab League to give Syria's seat back to the country.
Participants raised Syrian and Palestinian flags as well as banners asking for an end to the decades-long bans that have deprived them of their basic needs and resulted in a surge of food and medicine prices.
This is an unjust siege. We as Syrians are suffering from this siege in all aspects of our daily lives, starting from transportation, because the bans have caused a lack of fuel as well as shortage in medicine and also high food prices. All that is because of the imperial blockade.
Life changed so much following the sanctions. Prices went high. People are searching for their basic needs. This siege caused a shortage of so many basic commodities. We call on the world to do something and help us.
The recent earthquakes have further worsened the already deteriorating economic and humanitarian situation in Syria. The UN says even before the earthquake tragedy, 70% of the population needed humanitarian assistance due to the war on the country. One challenge after another, Syrians endured so many hardships in the past decade that made living a normal life a daily challenge. US and EU sanctions exacerbated.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Loci is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
I find your argument strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
Logical, unemotional, completely pragmatic. And we poor, irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical humans again.
Which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed.
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
Will you try to understand how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me.
The whole notion of logic.
You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Huwwara, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
South Africa Parliament votes for a downgrading of ties with Israel. Draft resolution says the country embassy would be downgraded in solidarity with the Palestinians. South Africa's parliament on Tuesday voted in favor of downgrading the country's embassy in Israel in light of continuing abuses against Palestinians. A statement released by the National Freedom Party, which introduced the draft resolution, said it was a move that has been supported by anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela. This is a moment Mandela would be proud of. He always said our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians, read the statement. South Africa's relation with Israel has been tense in recent years, not least as numerous human rights groups, chiming with comments made by Palestinian and South African campaigners for years, declared that Israel was guilty of apartheid. In the statement, the NFP, a center-left party with only 2 seats in the parliament, thanks other parties, including the ruling African National Congress, for their support. The state of Israel was built through the displacement, murder, and maiming of Palestinians, and to maintain their grip on power, they've instituted apartheid to control and manage Palestinians, reading the statement. As South Africans, we refuse to stand by while apartheid is being perpetrated again. Israel forces have killed at least 69 Palestinians since this year, which corresponds to a rate of nearly one killing every day. It's the bloodiest start of the year since 2000, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. At least 13 Israelis were killed by Palestinians in the same period. Nablus and Jenin have witnessed an uptick in armed resistance against Israeli targets in recent months. With Muslim, Christian, and Jewish holidays overlapping next month, many fear more deadly escalations could follow. CI Director William Burns recently said current tensions in the West Bank bear an unhappy resemblance to the Second Intifada. The threat of an uncontrollable outbreak of violence has prompted Jordan, Egypt, and the U.S. to initiate de-escalation efforts in recent months. And from All Israel News, South African Parliament votes to downgrade Israeli embassy. The South African Parliament on Tuesday passed a draft resolution to downgrade its embassy in Israel. The resolution was sponsored by the National Freedom Party, which has only 2 seats and requires the support of other parties to pass the resolution. The NFP said the downgrade would be implemented due to Israel's continuing abuse of Palestinians. A statement released by the party said, "As South Africans, we refuse to stand by while apartheid is being perpetrated again." And from iol.co.za, NFP rejoices at historic Israel embassy downgrade. The National Freedom Party said it was ecstatic that its draft resolution as the National Assembly to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel has been passed by Parliament. This is a moment Madiba would be proud of. He always said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. Today we took a step closer to the attainment of that freedom for Palestinians. MP Ahmed Munzoor Sheikh Imam, who introduced the resolution, said. In 2019, South Africa downgraded its embassy in Tel Aviv following a decision by the ANC more than a year prior. The NFP said that by passing the latest resolution, a message was sent that South Africa remained in pursuit of a more just and equitable world. This resolution demands accountability from Israel. It's a courageous move that demonstrates our commitment to a country, to justice, human rights, freedom. The state of Israel was built through the displacement, murder, and maiming of Palestinians, and to maintain their group on power, they've instituted apartheid to control and manage Palestinians. The Institute of Apartheid by the State of Israel contravenes international law and is a violation of the human rights of Palestinians. As South Africans, we refuse to stand by while apartheid is being perpetrated again, said Imam. The move, however, has been rejected by the SA Zionist Federation that said the motion would have an effect on Israel, but sent a worrying message to South African Jews, Christians, and Muslims wishing to travel or make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land for religious reasons. It called on the ANC to welcome the state of Israel. This decision comes at a time when South Africans are being brought to their knees by a crippling energy crisis, with rolling blackouts destroying businesses and livelihoods on a daily basis. This is taking place against a backdrop of record-breaking unemployment figures, while crime runs unabated alongside a murder rate that's higher than the death toll in Russia's war on Ukraine. We note that this symbolic act took place during a Purim, a Jewish holiday that commemorates how Jews were saved from genocide at the hands of Haman in ancient Persia. It's ironic that Parliament would pick this day of all days to target and sanction the world's only Jewish state, whose existence serves to prevent another genocide against the Jewish people. And from onecoal.com, South Africa downgrades Israeli embassy over ongoing apartheid, and they should know. The Middle East Eye reports that the South African Parliament has voted to downgrade the Israeli embassy in Pretoria to liaison status. The resolution was introduced by the tiny center-left National Freedom Party, which has only 2 seats in Parliament. Its passage was assured, however, when the African National Congress supported it with 230 seats. The ANC holds 57.5% of the seats in the South African Parliament. Kuthar Sambo at the South Africa's Radio 91.3 quoted NFP member Ahmad Munzur Sheikh Imam as saying in late February, "As a country that's experienced the devastating effects of apartheid, we cannot turn a blind eye to the gross human rights violations being committed against Palestinians. It's imperative for South Africa to take a stand and speak out against those atrocities. We therefore call upon all political parties to support this resolution to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel." Lelohonolo Mashigo wrote at the Star that the NFP highlighted that during the apartheid era, downgrading diplomatic relations with South Africa was a powerful tool for the international community to exert pressure on the apartheid government to end its discriminatory policies. He then quoted the NFP party statement, "By downgrading our embassy in Israel, we'll send a strong message that South Africa will not tolerate or condone any country that practices racial segregation and apartheid-like policies. This action will put democratic pressure on Israel to end its discriminatory policies." Imam is quoted as asserting, "The attempts to reduce the Palestinian struggle for liberation to merely a religious conflict is a reductionist approach that ignores the complex and varied nature of the oppression and human rights violations being committed against Palestinians by the State of Israel." We urge all MPs to stand for freedom, justice, and human rights by supporting this resolution. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, the leader of the African National Congress, has been pressured on this issue since soon after he came into office in 2018. As far back as January 2019, Ramaphosa said in response to a question on when the downgrade would happen, "Government's in the process of giving effect to a resolution of the government party that South Africa should downgrade its embassy in Israel. Our approach is informed by our concern at the ongoing violation of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the refusal of the government of Israel to enter into meaningful negotiations to find a just and peaceful resolution to this conflict. We're also concerned about the resurgence of confrontation and conflict in this region and about the grave humanitarian cost of further intransigence. Our approach is also informed by an appreciation of the constructive role South Africa is being called upon to play in the quest for a peace in the Middle East. We're clear on our support for the achievement of the Palestinian state alongside the right of the state of Israel to exist in peace and security with its neighbors. In implementing this conference resolution, we're mindful of South Africa's responsibility to continue engaging with all parties to the conflict, to see where we'd be able to provide assistance. As such, the South African government remains seized with the modalities of downgrading the South African embassy in Israel, and we will communicate once cabinet is fully finalized on this matter. It seems clear that this step was a long time coming, and also that ANC has also been dragging its feet on it. My guess is that the ANC bit the bullet now because of the extremist character of the current Israel government, some ministers of which have openly spoken about wiping out Palestinian villages or formally annexing Palestinian territory. Older South Africans who remember the apartheid government of the 1970s and 80s and who have visited the Israeli-occupied West Bank have said that it brought bad memories flooding back into their minds and that the situation actually seemed to them worse than South Africa's apartheid had been. Apartheid is the Dutch word for racial segregation. At a recent African Union meeting, the Israel delegate was asked to leave. Ramaphosa said he supported that decision. And from Wafa, South African Parliament passes historic resolution to downgrade the embassy in Israel. The National Freedom Party said it was ecstatic that the draft resolution to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel has been passed by Parliament. This is a historic moment for our country and a demonstration of our unwavering commitment to justice, human rights, and freedom, it said in the statement. This is a moment Madiba would be proud of, and by passing this resolution, we're sending a powerful message to the world that South Africa remains a beacon of hope and a shining example of what's possible when we come together in pursuit of a more just and equitable world. This resolution demands accountability from Israel. It's a courageous move that demonstrates our commitment as a country to justice, human rights, and freedom. The state of Israel was built through the displacement, murder, and maiming of Palestinians, and to maintain their grip on power, they've instituted apartheid to control and manage Palestinians. This institution of apartheid by the State of Israel contravened international law and is a violation of the human rights of Palestinians. As South Africans, we refuse to stand by while apartheid is being perpetrated again. While many will argue that downgrading the South African embassy in Israel will impair its ability to act as a neutral mediator in the conflict, the NFP said it believes neutrality is not an option in the face of oppression and human rights violations. The sentiment was best articulated by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, "If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor." The NFP also thanked all South Africans who supported this resolution and demonstrated their commitment to human rights and justice. It's through the collective efforts of all of us that we can make a positive impact on the world and create a better future for all, it said. And from Ynet, South Africa Parliament passes resolution to downgrade embassy in Israel. Chairman of the South African Zionist Federation says the vote's a result of divisive politics and groups playing to their domestic base and will have no impact on Israel. The South African Parliament voted this week to downgrade the status of the South African embassy in Israel in solidarity with Palestinians. The resolution was proposed by the National Freedom Party, which has only 2 seats in the South African Parliament but allied with the ANC to push the resolution through. Despite the fact that the resolution passed, it was viewed as a highly partisan move that was supported by only 52% of the parliament. It's such a difference in the way this same story is reported by different outlets. In a statement that NFP said the party is ecstatic that the draft resolution to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel has been passed by Parliament, while many will argue that the downgrading our embassy will impair our ability to act as a neutral mediator in the conflict. The NFP believes neutrality is not an option in the face of oppression and human rights violations. The resolution was met with criticism from the South African Zionist Federation, which issued a statement condemning the vote. The SAZF also emphasized the hypocrisy of the motion, noting that the ANC government's created a foreign policy that aims to befriend dictatorships and bash democracies. It obsesses over Israel, which is the size of our Kruger National Park, and at the same time hosts Navy war drills with Russia, responsible for horrific crimes and the deaths of thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians over the past year. Chairman of SAZF, Rowan Palavin, told Ynet in a comment, "This symbolic motion doesn't represent the position of the majority of South Africans who are either neutral or positively disposed towards Israel." This is almost the propaganda. And from Israel Hoyam, the Parliament of South Africa voted Wednesday to downgrade ties with Israel in what's a culmination of many years of rocky relations with the Jewish state. The measure was backed by 208 lawmakers, while 94 opposed it. The move will see Israel's embassy in the capital, Pretoria, downgraded to a liaison office. The measure was introduced by the National Freedom Party, which has 2 members in parliament, to protest what it considers to be a policy of apartheid and discriminatory practices against Palestinians. This is a moment Mandela will be proud of. He always said our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians. The left-wing party said in a statement Wednesday, the state of Israel has built through the displacement, murder, and maiming of Palestinians, and to maintain their grip on power, they've instituted apartheid to control and manage Palestinians, read the statement, which continued, as South Africans, we refuse to stand by while apartheid is being perpetrated again. So I was thinking, let's look up the 2 members of the National Freedom Party. See what their names are. See if they had any more to say about Israel. Oh, the National Treasurer, Ahmed Mansour Sheikh Imam, is part of the National Freedom Party. Cynthia Mbala or Mbali Shinga and Magwaza Msibi. Oh no, Magwaza Msibi was not reappointed. Let's see, current NFP members. Well, we know one of them is Mansour Sheikh Imam. And we got a couple of quotes from him. Let's see if there's anything else out there. Mansour. Imam. Mansour Sheikh Imam. Oh, yeah, there's one more article and it's Israel leaning that includes his name. So with that, I'm going to open up a channel.
Beam me up, Mr. Spark. Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up. Beam us up, quickly. Beam us up home. Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up. Scott, prepare to beam us up. Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up. Beam us up. Scotty, beam us up fast. Stand by to beam us up. Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up. Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control. To the special court. Huwwara, spokesperson for Palestine.